Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today in this module, we will be discussing about waste disposal, the various options which are available for waste disposal, that is open dumping and controlled dumping. Then we will discuss about what are the problems associated with open dumping, and we will define what is landfill, and then what are the different criteria or considerations you have to take into account while selecting a land for landfill. To begin with, the definition of solid waste, again it is any unwanted material that is of no use to a primary user. In a waste management plan, if you see, the waste which is generated from the different sources are collected and brought to a transfer station where they are processed by different processing methods like volume reduction, shredding, and they are also subjected to various treatments like composting, vermicomposting, biogasification and incineration, pyrolysis, etc. Now, after this treatment, the residue has to be disposed of. So, if you look into the management plan, it begins with collection, then transport, storage, processing, treatment, and finally it ends in disposal of solid waste. In a management plan, disposal is the last phase. Now, disposal can be done by two ways. One is open dumping, the other one is controlled dumping. Normally, in developing countries or underdeveloped countries, the waste is being simply disposed of in an open area without any protection. In developed countries, they do controlled dumping, or they dump the waste or contain the waste in a specific area or a engineered structure called as a landfill. Now, in this module, we will discuss about waste disposal, then we will also look into the open dumping and what are the various problems associated with open dumping. Then we will define what is a landfill, then we will discuss about the criteria or considerations which you have to take into account for the construction, for the selection of a site for landfill. With this introduction, now let us look into the learning objectives of this module. First, we will define what is waste disposal, then we will understand the various waste disposal options available, then we look into the problems associated with open dumping. We will also define what is controlled dumping, that is containment of a waste in landfill. Then we will study about the various criteria which you have to look into while selecting a landfill. Finally, we will also understand the various considerations for a landfill, and finally, the module will end by looking into the different types of landfills available. Now, as I told you earlier, disposal is the last step or the final step in waste management plan. This is where the fate of a solid waste ends. Ultimately, any solid waste that is generated ends in a disposal site. Either it is directly after it is generated from the collection site, either it is directly disposed of into the landfill, or it undergoes treatment or processing, and later the residue which is left out after treatment is taken off to the disposal sites. In country like India, we always practice open dumping. The waste that is generated from the collection area are taken up by the waste collectors and then disposed of into an open area which does not have any protection. Protection in the sense the environmental matrices are disturbed. It pollutes the water, soil, air and various other problems it creates. So, most of the developing and underdeveloped countries, the solid waste is dumped in an open land without any protection or environmental control. That sort of dumping, you call it as a unsafe dumping. The solid waste are also disposed of in water bodies. You can see in recent times you can find a lot of problem with marine pollution where a huge amount of plastics are being disposed of and you can find it in the oceans. The marine pollution is one important issue which is gaining up a lot of attention. Now, solid waste, as I told you, they are also disposed of in water bodies. Whenever you visit a tourist place, you can see a lot of material which is littered and it is just thrown off into the water bodies. So, people also use these water bodies as a source or as a disposal site. On the other side, if you see, in developed countries, they practice a system of safe or controlled dumping, which is called as a landfill. Now, uncontrolled dumping or open dumping is the most common method which is followed for waste disposal, and it is practiced in many countries. As I told you earlier, mostly the developed and developing countries practice this. In this method, the waste are dumped at a designated site or land without any environmental protection or control. The waste disposed in these open area, they remain there for a long period of time and they start affecting the environment, and slowly it also affects the health of an individual. Due to the various problems associated with the open dumping, landfills came into picture because they consider landfill as a safe option where the waste is being contained with proper protection mechanism, or in other words you can say it is contained by a barrier system, so that the water, air and soil does not get polluted. Now, let us look into the various problems which is associated with open dumping. Now, the problems associated with open dumping include: first, it causes contamination to soil, water and air. During uncontrolled dumping, the leachate is nothing but a watery liquid that oozes out of a material during degradation. Now, this leachate percolates into the soil. When it percolates into the soil, the contaminants or pollutants enter into the soil. Now, these contaminants may or may not be toxic. Now, it also affects the microbial diversity of the soil and the vegetation of the area. Wherever you see these dump sites or dumping area, you cannot find any vegetation. Hardly you see vegetation, and which is sparsely vegetated. Through the soil medium, the leachate further percolates and infiltrates, and finally it reaches the groundwater, thereby contaminating them. Now, when there is a rainfall, what will happen? The water reaches the surface and it mixes off with the leachate which is generated by the waste. Now, once it gets mixed off, a surface runoff is created. So, through this way it is discharged or it enters into the water bodies. So, during precipitation, the rainwater can mix with leachate and it can be carried off as surface runoff. Through this, they also pollute the other surface water bodies. The next type of problem which is caused or generally people face is that these open dumps, they serve as a breeding grounds. They serve as a breeding grounds for many of the disease causing vectors. Like, since the waste has been piled up, you can find a lot of flies, mosquitoes and other rodents which are there. Now, these are the main carriers. They can cause malaria, they can cause other diseases like dengue, etc. Now, even the stray animals, they also get into these waste piles and they can also act as a carrier. Now, stray animals can be dogs, pigs, cow and many more. They also act as a carrier and bring up. Now, these stray animals, when they enter into the dump sites and they come into the residential area, they come along with the vector and they spread the diseases in the residential area. Now, since the waste dumped in the open area does not have any cover or a capping, the waste is carried off by the wind. When there is a wind which is blowing, it will carry all the loose materials from the waste pile and it will keep spreading or travelling through a long distance. It can come back to the residential area, or even sometimes they get stuck to the vehicles, the glass or the front mirror of the vehicles, and they also stick on to the traffic signals. Due to this, there are chances of the accidents to occur and it is dangerous for the individual. To recover these metals, from the waste pile, it is difficult for the rag pickers. So, what do? Is they lit fire on these waste piles, and once it burns and it gets converted into ash, then they remove the valuable metals from that. Now, since they do that, it results in a emission of the particulate matter as well as gaseous pollutants. So, to recover the valuable metals in the waste dump, the rag pickers set fire to the waste, resulting in emission of the particulate matter and other gaseous pollutants, leading to air pollution. Now, smoke is also a major problem which is caused in open dumps, which is due to the fire set by these people. So, by this way also the air is being contaminated. In addition to that, when the waste gets degraded, it also generates or releases a lot of gases like carbon dioxide, methane, VOCs, that is volatile organic carbons. They also cause the air pollution. So, air pollution is also caused by emission of gaseous pollutants, example carbon dioxide, methane, VOCs, etc., produced during waste degradation. The emission of greenhouse gases from these dump sites result in global warming. The land where the waste is dumped, they undergo continuous degradation, and at one point of time the land gets deteriorated and it is of no further use. The waste dumped in open dumps, they create unpleasant odor. Whenever you cross by a waste dumping area or even a vehicle which is collecting a waste, you get that obnoxious smell which is very unpleasant. So, such odor is also released from these areas. Now, in general, if you see the aesthetics of the area, for example, nobody would like to see an area where the waste is being dumped, because it is like you can find a lot of flies, mosquito, all these animals just moving around these dump sites. So, it does not give a proper aesthetic look. So, these dump sites affect the aesthetic look of the area. As I told you earlier, these waste dumps or piles attract a lot of insect, rodents, birds and animals. Now, the contaminants which are present in this waste piles are toxic, which affects the species. Sometimes they also kill the insects, birds and animals. Through these insects, birds and animals, the toxic contaminants, they enter into the food chain and slowly it reaches the human beings, causing a lot of health issues among human beings. Now, this picture shows like how in a dump site you can find a lot of birds which are there, which are sitting over these open dumps, and the right side also you can see how a lot of material are being dispersed off into the open landfills. So far we have discussed about the various problems which you face out of open dumping, that means the waste is being just thrown off into an open land. Now, with these problems, then people thought we should have some sort of a controlled dumping which should be safe for the environment as well as the individual health. So, with that the concept of controlled dumping or landfilling originated. So, the problems associated with uncontrolled dumping resulted in the development of the concept of controlled dumping, that is a landfill. Now, landfill is a safe method for waste disposal and it is defined as an engineered structure where your waste can be contained in a safe manner. They are designed and operated according or to meet the standards laid by the government. It is designed in a way to protect the environment and health of a people. Now, they say landfill is the largest route of disposal. This particular option of waste disposal is suitable when the land is available at an affordable price, when you have adequate workforce and technical resources. This, if all these conditions are there, then landfill will be a cheapest option. Now, what are the different components of a landfill? As I told you, landfill is an engineered structure which has a lot of barrier system so that it contains the waste and it does not allow the contaminants or the pollutants to leach out from the landfill. Now, the components, you can see there are three major components of a landfill. One is a liner system, the other one is the waste emplacement cells. Emplacement means just placing or loading the waste. The third one is a cover or a cap, which is the final closure. When the landfill is full, it has to be closed, that is called as landfill cover or capping. Now, this leachate collection system, groundwater monitoring system and methane gas monitoring system, these are for monitoring the landfill. Now, the leachate collection is during the waste degradation, the leachate which comes out should be collected, otherwise the water gets accumulated and it will affect. So, the leachate has to be collected out from the landfill site. Now, the groundwater monitoring system or methane gas monitoring system, they are for post closure. Post closure means once the landfill is done, there is no further space to accommodate the waste, then you have to close the landfill, or you can call it as sealing the landfill. Now, after that you have to keep monitoring the landfill continuously for 5 to 10 years, so that you can identify if there is any leakage, you can identify through these groundwater monitoring system and methane gas monitoring system. The details of this components of a landfill we will discuss in the next module. Now, this is an image of a landfill where you can see it is a well engineered structure. You can find the barrier system both on the sides as well as at the bottom. You have a liner system, and then the cell, the waste is being placed in terms of cells, and once the cell is full, then they move into the next cell. So, they keep on doing it like that, and you can see how on top it is covered by a soil layer, and you can find the groundwater monitoring system and leachate pump or collection system for collecting the leachate, so that it does not enter into the groundwater, and you also have a gas monitoring system. Now, this is how a landfill will look like. Now, so far we have discussed about the open dumps, we have discussed about the landfills. Now, we also have to see or look into the various criteria which is required for selecting a site for a landfill. Now, landfill, though it is an engineered structure where you contain the waste and you have a barrier system, so you protect the environment, still there are certain conditions you have to look into while selecting a site for a landfill. Now, the selection of a landfill site depends upon the following criteria. One, the proximity of the site to the source of waste generation, the distance from the boundary of the site to residential area or agriculture or urban site. This means that the waste site should not be close to the residential area or an agriculture area or an urban site. It should be always, these landfills are located in the outskirts of the city, away from the city. But though they are located on the outskirts of the city, still they should be accessible. They should have proper road connectivity, the transport infrastructure should be good. Then the impact on the local environment. When you select a site or you allocate a site for a landfill, you should understand or study how the landfill is going to affect the environment, local environment around. Now, next is you should also consider the geological and hydrogeological stability of the site. Now, also these sites should not be located in a place where there are chances of frequent flooding or some landslides or avalanches can occur. So, such areas should be avoided. Now, the assessment of soil characteristics is very important, because through the soil only the leachate gets percolated. So, you also have to focus on the soil characteristics. You should know what is the mineralogy, what is the permeability of the soil. You should also find the grain size of the bedrock. If you understand all these things, it will help you to decide or design or structure out the landfill in such a way so that it does not cause any pollution. Then hydrological isolation. Hydrological isolation means it should be away from the water body. It can be either be it a groundwater or a surface water, it should be isolated. The site should be isolated from these water bodies. Next, you also should consider the meteorological data. What is the amount of precipitation in that particular area, or the amount of rainfall the place gets every year. You should also consider the wind speed and its direction and other data. When you select a site, you should also perform a topographic survey. Now, this topographic survey will help you determine what is the slope, what is the elevation, and whether the terrain is rugged or undulated. So, all these things you will understand. So, a topographical survey is undertaken to calculate the available void space and therefore, the waste capacity of the site. The background levels of water and air quality should also be assessed to find out the impact of the site in the long term. For example, if you have this data about the water and the air quality, after some time when the landfill is closed, if you find out some unusual changes in the air and water quality, this will also help you to find out whether there is any leakage or any problem in the landfill site. So, always you should assess the water and the air quality before you select a site for the landfill. Apart from this, you also should take care, like these landfill sites should not be located near a UNESCO heritage site, or it should not be near a monument, it should not be it should not be near a national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. You should also not select a land with good agricultural productivity. Even land which is barren and which can be brought back to productivity should also be avoided when you select the site for landfilling. Now let us look into the considerations for landfill. So, since it is an engineering structure, you should consider the following criteria. One is site selection, second is your waste density, third is settlement, fourth is material requirement, fifth is drainage and operational practice. If you consider all these parameters, then the construction of a landfill will be smooth. Now, site capacity. The capacity is one important factor when you design a landfill. Whenever you discuss about the capacity, the landfill should be able to accommodate a waste for almost 30 to 50 years. Now, this is called as a design period. Within this period, when you calculate, the population projection and all should be considered, and the landfill site should be able to accommodate so much of waste for 30 to 50 years. Now, the capacity is also determined based on the following parameters. One, the amount of waste which is generated determines your capacity. Your waste density also determines your capacity. For example, the waste will have different density. If you talk about the inert material, they will have a different density. If you have biodegradable material, they have different density. If you talk about the plastics, metals and all, they will have different density. So, the waste density also is an important parameter which determines the capacity of your landfill. Then the amount of intermediate or daily cover. This you will understand much better when we discuss about the structure of a landfill. The waste that is generated every day. For example, the amount of waste that is generated for today, it will be placed in a cell. At the end of the day, a thin layer of soil is used to cover the waste material. This will help or avoid the loose material from flying away and also small rodents burrowing inside. So, that is important. So, the amount of intermediate and daily cover also determines your site capacity. The thickness of capping system and the amount of settlement also influences your site capacity. Settlement means due to compression, compaction and degradation, the waste, the volume of waste keeps reducing or it gets compacted. That is called as the amount of settlement. The next one is waste density. The density of the waste within the landfill will vary depending on the degree of pre-compaction of the waste before emplacement, variation in the components within the waste, progression of degradation, amount of daily and intermediate cover and mass of overlaying waste. Because see, the the overlaying waste, obviously it will be heavy. So, it will press the waste which is lying below. Then if you are even the density varies or it is affected during the movement of a truck or the lorries which carry the waste. The lorry, they are heavy tired vehicle, and when it carries the waste it will be very heavy, and when it goes across these waste cells, obviously it will compact the waste and the volume gets reduced. So, the degree of pre-compaction of the waste influences the amount of waste to be loaded into the landfill. It will also influence the amount of waste settlement in a landfill. The density of the waste can range from 0.65 to 0.85 tons per meter cube. For some waste, they can also go up to as low as to 0.4 tons per meter cube or as high as 1.23 tons per meter cube. The inert waste like bricks, concrete, stones and all, they have a very high density of typically about 1.5 tons per meter cube. Now, the next consideration is settlement. Now, settlement of the waste in landfill occurs due to the physical alteration, physical rearrangement. That means, for example, the waste, if it is loose, if it has a lot of void space, slowly due to the weight of the overlying waste or when a truck moves over it, so automatically the void space gets reduced. Okay. So, that is called as physical rearrangement. So, the settlement can occur due to physical rearrangement or due to biological, physical or chemical degradation process, which will also lead to the settlement. The settlement also occurs due to the overburden pressure, which I told you a couple of slides before. The typical long term settlement value for a municipal solid waste is 15 to 20% reduction. So, once you load the municipal solid waste into a cell, you can find around 15 to 20% reduction on a long term. Overall, for the first 5 years, almost 90% of the settlement occurs. I am talking about the municipal solid waste. Now, the settlement takes place gradually and it goes up to 50 years, that is the entire design period. Now, the inert waste shows very low settlement because their density is high, as well as they do not degrade, they are inert material, they do not degrade. So, they show very low settlement. Now, there are three main stages of settlement. One is your initial compression, second is primary compression and third one is secondary compression. Now, in initial compression it is instantaneous, that is spontaneous, and it occurs due to compaction of void space. Any material you cannot say it is tightly packed, it can be loosely arranged. So, more the compaction, the void spaces will go, the air space in between these particles will go off and it gets compacted. And the particles caused actually it occurs due to compression pressure due to the overlaying waste and the compaction vehicles. The second type of settlement called the primary compression, this occurs due to the dissipation of the leachate or the water and gases from the void spaces, and they take usually 30 days. In the secondary compression, it takes years. This is very slow process and it mainly depends upon the biodegradation of waste. It takes years and occurs due to biodegradation of waste. During secondary compression, you can find the generation of leachate as well as gas, which will also reduce the mass and volume of your waste. The amount and rate of landfill settlement will depend on different factors. One is your initial void volume of the waste. It will also depend upon the compaction of the waste and the thickness of the waste. Normally, they say deeper landfills you can find a faster rate of settlement. The next consideration is material requirement. For the construction of a landfill, you require a huge amount of material, be it a natural or a synthetic material. Natural fill material, they include clay, sand, gravel, soil, which are usually used for lining, used as a lining material. Clay, which is the most popularly used lining material because of its low permeability. Gravel is used for drainage and for leachate collection. Clay is also used for as a capping material and for restoration of soil. The availability of such material on site will reduce the cost and it will increase the ease of operation. On the other side, if you see that these materials are not available, then you have to spend a lot of money for importing or transport, which will increase your cost. So, if the material are available in the or near the site, that will reduce your cost. The material is also required for daily cover. Apart from the lining or the liner system, these materials are also required for your daily cover. I told you daily cover will protect from the wind blown litter, it will avoid the insects and rodents getting or burrowing into it, and it will also avoid scavengers, fires and odor. Now, it is not only the soil material can be used as daily cover, even the garden waste or some alternative materials like reusable blanket material and other inert waste can also be used as a daily cover. The negative side of the daily cover is like every time when you spread one layer of cover over the waste material, it will occupy the landfill space, thereby it will reduce the operating time or the design period of the landfill. That means, you would have designed the waste loading for a period of 30 years only for the waste, that is the waste which is generated or brought to the disposal site. Now, in between, if you keep on using a daily cover or you keep covering the waste with a material or a daily cover, it will add on and the lifetime of the landfill will be reduced. Drainage is another important factor that needs to be constructed while you construct a landfill. The excessive water that is received during rainfall, you should avoid the water from rainfall from entering into the or infiltrating into the waste, because when it enters, obviously it will mix with the leachate and it will also result in the generation of more leachate, which will get washed off or which will infiltrate. So, that has to be avoided. Also, this can be avoided by you can construct cut off drains both around and inside the site, so that the water can be drained off and the waste will not be wet. Okay. So, cut off drains both around and inside the site should be constructed to keep the waste from becoming too wet, thereby increasing the leachate generation. Also, the capping system, the final cover which acts as a barrier system, will also prevent the waste from getting into contact with the rainfall, and also it will prevent the rainwater from entering into the waste. The last consideration is the operational practices. Now, when you talk about the operational practices, you should consider like the traffic movement, cover material storage, laying, security, all these things you should consider when you build a landfill. The typical modern landfill site consists of a secure, fenced and landscape site with a proper access route for the transport vehicle. So, all these operational practices you should again take into account when you construct a landfill. Now, let us look into the types of landfill. There are three types of landfill. One, a landfill which is for containing a hazardous waste, it is also called as a secured landfill. The other one, which is for the non-hazardous waste, you can use it for municipal solid waste, it is called as a sanitary landfill. Then there is also a landfill for inert material. So, these are the three types of landfills. Now, first we look into the hazardous waste or secured landfill. Now, you all know what is hazardous waste. Hazardous waste is defined as any waste which is very dangerous, which is dangerous for storing, it is difficult or dangerous to be treated, or it is dangerous to be disposed of. Now, it is defined as any a material is called as hazardous if it possesses either one or more properties which is listed here, that is corrosivity, toxicity, reactivity and ignitability. In short, you call it as CRIT, C-R-I-T. Now, certain hazardous waste are not permitted into these landfills because the Examples can be the liquid waste, flammable waste, explosives, oxidizing waste, infectious waste, clinical or hospital waste, and also used tires. They are all not allowed to be disposed of along with the hazardous waste. These landfills have high specification. For example, when you discuss about the hazardous landfill or secure landfill, you should have a very good containment system. The barriers or the liner system should be so well designed, so that the leachate or the landfill gas does not escape out, and it should not affect the environment. Next type of landfill is for non-hazardous waste, or it is also called as sanitary landfill. Mainly it is used for municipal waste, and non-hazardous means any waste that includes the municipal solid waste and a wide range of industrial waste such as organic and inorganic waste, provided that they are non-hazardous. Stable non-reactive hazardous waste can also be used, but in a solidified or a vitrified manner, and they can be deposited into the non-hazardous or the sanitary landfill in the form of a solidified or vitrified manner. It is solidified or vitrified so that it does not cause any leachate generation, and the leaching behavior is equivalent to the general category of non-hazardous waste. Third type of waste is your waste landfill for inert waste. Now, this inert waste is defined as any waste that does not undergo any significant change, be it a physical, chemical or biological transformation. They do not dissolve, they do not burn, they do not degrade or react physically or chemically. They do not give rise to any form of pollution or harm to human health. The total leachability and pollutant content of inert waste is highly insignificant. So, now examples of such waste are bricks, glass, tiles, ceramics, concrete, stones. So, for this there is a specific type of landfill called as the inert waste landfill. At the end of this module, we have discussed about what is waste disposal, what are the different options which are available for waste disposal. We have also seen what type of waste disposal that is being practiced, like overall, as I told you, developing and underdeveloped countries, they practice open dumping. Open dumping is nothing but just disposing or throwing off a waste in a open area without any environmental protection. Now, there are lot of problems associated with these open dumping, which are very harmful, which is affecting the health of an individual as well as the environment. So, based on this problems, the concept of controlled dumping evolved. Now, controlled dumping is nothing but landfilling, where the waste is contained in an engineered structure or a structure where the waste is stored in a safe manner. That means, it does not affect the surrounding environment, or it does not cause any health hazards. Later, we also defined, or we looked into the various components of a landfill, like the liner system, the waste emplacement cell, then the landfill cover. I also briefed you about the groundwater and landfill gas monitoring systems, which we will discuss more in detail about which we will discuss in the upcoming modules. Then after this, we also discussed about the various criteria which we have to take into consideration while you select a site for a landfill construction. Then we also discussed about the considerations like the drainage, settlement and other parameters like operational practices, capacity, etc. For a landfill construction. Finally, we discussed about the 3 different types of landfills, one for your hazardous waste, the secured landfill, the other one is for your municipal solid waste, your sanitary landfill, and the last one is for inert waste. Inert waste like stone, brick, glass, ceramics, etc. I hope you would have understood about the concept of waste disposal and open dumping. Thank you.